what's changed in the AI landscape from your perspective as a venture capital investor since you launched? Because AI has come a long way.
Yeah, when we launched, we had this very strong belief that AI would be a decade-plus shift, the most important shift in technology we were likely to see in our lifetimes. And then we made some early bets that application companies and companies that sort of invested vertically up and down the stack would create a lot of value. I think that is even more true now, and the myth of the GPT wrapper has been brushed away. One of the major developments over the last few weeks that everyone has been paying attention to is, of course, a more and more competitive foundation model landscape.
That's right. I mean, you were tweeting about DeepSeek in December before the world freaked out just last month. But we also had another venture capital investor on the show last week who called it a grave national security threat. And I would love to get your thoughts on the strength of that model, what it means for AI startups competing in this space. And do you agree with that statement? Is it a national security threat?
Let's take the first part first. So it's an incredibly useful model and considered on many capability tests as state of the art. And I think what is really interesting about it is that DeepSeek as a company released a base model, which you can think of as just pre-training, then a instruction tuned model, which is a set of work that allows the model to be more helpful to respond in a sort of chat interface, and then a reasoning model, which is parallel to, for example, OpenAI's O1 model. And so right at the frontier, now you have an open option, albeit one from a Chinese hedge fund. I think that was quite surprising to the world and quite democratizing to application developers to have this force of open source from Meta, from Mistral, from DeepSeek now. Whether it serves as a push for the US to get more competitive on this incredibly important industry front of being first in the race to stronger AI technologies remains to be seen. But I think it's very clear that export controls are not leak-proof, and no country has a monopoly on AI talent.
Sarah, let's go into how it changes the game in terms of the valuation stack, because you are in at the large language model layer with a small allocation towards a Mistral, but you're also in the application layer of these large language models. When I think of cognition, for example, how do you think the money's going to flow ultimately?
Yeah, one of our core beliefs is that AI makes the pie bigger, and you can think about it as the stack, as you described, right? Infrastructure, tooling, model companies, application companies, and those that are verticalized. But we're much more interested in application companies and verticalized companies to date. And part of it is seeing the LLM landscape play out. It's been a very expensive game to play, despite DeepSeek's claims around a $6 million single training run that vastly underprices the cost of experimentation and all of the infrastructure that was used in, for example, post-training and inference as well. And so it's still a very expensive game to play. I think in terms of economic opportunity of the traditional venture capital game being capital efficient growth, we think that is going to be most concentrated in the application layer.
And it was all about agents, Sarah, before that. And Sierra, you're in, Brett Taylor leading that business. And that, of course, taking on a Salesforce, for example. Is agentic AI where the real value is going to come in the next year or so?
Yeah, agentic is a really hard thing to define, but I think one thing that we're really excited about with companies like Sierra and others is the more, very simply, the more that AI does for you, the more people will be willing to pay for it, right? And so something like Sierra, it improves the customer experience, especially for people with very high value customers. So think of finance, subscription, travel, et cetera. And I think as we see AI models get more capable, beyond answering simple questions to completing tasks, which is something that will take a lot of vertical specific and last mile work, we should expect these companies to be able to capture a lot of that value too.